The pain came first, sharp and insistent, radiating from his left shoulder down through his ribs. Captain James Reed tried to move and found his body uncooperative, heavy as lead and twice as reluctant. His eyes cracked open to dim purple light, and for a moment he thought he was still in the wreckage of his scout ship, still tumbling through the void between stars. Then he saw them. Two figures sat beside what appeared to be a sleeping platform, their forms humanoid, but distinctly not human. The larger one had skin that shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting between deep blue and violet, depending on how the light caught it. Her eyes were enormous, taking up nearly a third of her face, with vertical pupils that dilated as she noticed his movement. The smaller figure, clearly younger, possessed the same features but in miniature, her coloring slightly paler, almost lavender in the ambient glow. They were beautiful in a way that transcended species, and James found himself staring despite the fog in his mind. The elder one spoke, her voice melodic and layered with harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. He understood nothing, but the tone was gentle, concerned. She reached toward him with a 3-fingered hand, and he noticed the delicate webbing between each digit, translucent and veined with what might have been bioluminescence. James tried to speak and managed only a croak. The younger one, the daughter, he presumed, jumped slightly and chittered something that sounded almost like laughter. The mother made a soothing gesture and held a container to his lips. The liquid inside tasted like copper and honey, strange but not unpleasant, and it soothed his parched throat immediately. "Thank you," he managed, though he knew they couldn't understand. The mother tilted her head in a gesture that was nearly universal, curiosity mixed with pleased surprise. She spoke again, slower this time, and gestured to herself, then to the daughter, then to him. Introductions, perhaps. The daughter bounced slightly in her seat, clearly excited, and pointed at him with both hands while speaking rapidly to her mother. James tried to sit up, and the mother gently but firmly pressed him back down. Her touch was cool, not cold, and her fingers were surprisingly strong. She made a negative gesture, shaking her head in a way that humans might, and he understood. Not yet. Rest first. The room around him was unlike anything in human design. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting slightly, and the purple light emanated from veins running through the ceiling like bioluminescent roots. Everything curved, nothing held sharp angles, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral he couldn't identify. Through a translucent section of wall, he could see movement outside. Other beings like his hosts moved through what appeared to be corridors or streets, some alone, others in groups. This was a city, or something like one. He was alive, recovered, from whatever disaster had befallen his ship, and in the care of aliens who had every reason to leave him to die, but hadn't. The daughter produced something from a pouch at her side, a flat rectangular device that glowed when she touched it. She held it up to him, and images began to play across its surface. They were crude, almost childlike drawings, but the story they told was clear. A vessel falling from the sky, figures rushing to help, the vessel broken beyond repair. A single occupant pulled from the wreckage, barely alive. Him. James felt his throat tighten with emotion he hadn't expected. These beings had saved him. At what risk to themselves, he couldn't know. First contact protocols dictated caution, observation, careful documentation of every interaction. But protocols seemed distant and irrelevant when faced with simple kindness across the void of species. He raised his right hand, the left still too painful to move, and placed it over his heart. Then he extended it toward them, palm up, hoping the gesture translated. The mother looked at the daughter, and something passed between them, some communication he couldn't hear or see. Then the mother reached out and placed her cool, webbed hand in his. The daughter did the same with her smaller hand, and for a moment, the three of them were connected. Human and alien, stranger and savior, all barriers reduced to simple touch. Over the following days, James learned to understand them in pieces. The mother's name sounded like a bell chime underwater, so he thought of her as Bell. The daughter's was higher, more crystalline, and he called her chime in his mind. They taught him words through patience and repetition, pointing at objects, and speaking their names, then laughing softly when he mangled the pronunciation with his inadequate human tongue. Bell was a physician of some kind, he gathered, and she had been the one to reconstruct his shoulder after the crash. She showed him scans of his injuries, displayed on devices that floated in mid-air, and even with the alien interface, he could see how bad it had been. 3 ribs cracked, shoulder dislocated and fractured, internal bleeding. He should have died. By all rights, he had been dying. Chime was endlessly curious about him, bringing him objects from around their dwelling and asking questions he mostly couldn't answer. She was particularly fascinated by his hair, which apparently their species lacked, and by his ability to make facial expressions. She would mirror him, trying to smile or frown, her large eyes narrowing and widening in approximation. He taught them about Earth as best he could, drawing pictures in return, showing them continents and oceans, the moon hanging in Earth's sky. Chime was delighted by the concept of a natural satellite, and drew him pictures of their own world, which apparently had 3 moons, each a different color. Bell taught him their gestures. A hand placed flat against the upper chest meant gratitude. Fingers spread and rotated meant question or confusion. Arms crossed over the stomach meant comfort or contentment. He practiced them diligently, wanting to communicate properly, wanting to be understood. They fed him strange foods that his system somehow processed, though Bell monitored him carefully for signs of rejection. Some dishes tasted like nothing he'd ever experienced, flavors his brain couldn't categorize. Others were surprisingly familiar, something close to bread, something else like fruit, though the textures were all wrong. At night, when the purple light dimmed to near darkness, he would lie on his platform and listen to them in the next room. Bell's voice low and soothing, Chime's higher and more animated. Sometimes they sang, harmonizing in ways that made his chest ache with their beauty. He wondered if they knew he could hear them, if they minded. He hoped not. His strength returned gradually. Bell allowed him to stand, then to walk, supporting him when his legs shook from disuse. Chime walked on his other side, her small hand gripping his, encouraging him in her musical language. Together they helped him to a window, and he looked out over their city for the first time. It sprawled beneath a sky the color of amber, buildings that grew rather than were built, spiraling upward in organic curves. Beings moved through the streets below, some on foot, others in vehicles that seemed to float on cushions of air. In the distance, he could see what might have been farmland, fields of plants that swayed in colors across the spectrum, from ultraviolet to infrared, if his eyes could have seen them. This was their world. These were their people. And they had welcomed him, a stranger who had fallen literally from the sky, without hesitation or apparent fear. The realization struck him then, profound and overwhelming. Humanity had always wondered what first contact would be like. Would it be hostile, diplomatic, scientific? They had prepared for every contingency, except this one, simple compassion. He turned to Bell and managed the words he'd been practicing. Thank you. In their language, it came out clumsy, his human mouth struggling with the harmonics, but close enough. Bell's eyes widened, and she made the gesture for joy, hands moving in spiral patterns from her chest. Chime bounced on her feet and repeated the words back to him, then added more he didn't know yet. That evening, Bell brought him to a device that looked like it might be communication equipment. She activated it and stepped back, gesturing for him to approach. The screen, if it was a screen, shimmered and resolved into an image that made his heart leap. Earth, his Earth. The blue and white sphere, turning in the black, more beautiful than he'd remembered. Bell had found it, somehow with whatever wreckage remained of his ship. She had located Earth's position. She was offering him a way home, or at least a way to make contact. James stared at his world, at the home he'd thought he'd never see again, and felt tears he didn't bother to hide. But when he turned to Bell and Chime, seeing their expectant faces, he realized something else. He would go home eventually. His people needed to know about this place, these beings, this possibility of friendship among the stars. But when he went, he would take with him the memory of this time. These two who had saved him and asked nothing in return. He would make sure humanity understood what he had learned here, that kindness was universal, that compassion needed no translation, that the vast dark between stars was not a barrier, but a bridge, waiting to be crossed. He placed his hand over, his heart in their gesture of gratitude, and extended both hands to them. Bell and Chime moved forward together, and the three of them stood in the purple light. Hands joined, three species become one in the simplest and most profound of ways. When he finally returned to human space, when he made his report to stunned officials,